One way they're trying to help them is by looking the other way on what used to be fairly blatant intentional grounding. And last night,
Yeah.
Kevin O'Connell was upset about a failure to call grounding on the Bears just one play before the long gain on 3rd and 10 to DJ Moore. They would have been facing 3rd and 24 if grounding had been called based upon where he was when he threw the ball. And he was right in the middle of the pocket. He started to break to the left. He ends up back in the pocket, dead center of the field. Danielle Hunter's trying to get him, and there goes the ball. And Charean, that ball almost hits the wall. It's like kicked into the wall by somebody standing right in front of the wall. Now, we know from a few weeks ago when that bizarre moment happened in the Lions-Raiders game on Monday night, where there was a potential intentional grounding by Jared Goff on the first drive of the game. John Perry, the ESPN rules analyst, came on and said, well, that kind of looked like grounding. And then they hit the bat signal from 345 Park Avenue and cram Walt Anderson into the broadcast for the first time they've ever done this, for this cameo, this Don Rickles walk-on from the 70s on Johnny Carson's show. Like, here's Walt Anderson. Oh, here's our friend Walt Anderson. Hey, Walt, what do you got? And he circles the wagons and defends the shield and says why it wasn't intentional grounding. I'd have loved to have heard him explain this one, but what we learned that night was, and when I looked at the rule, because Anderson didn't explain the rule the right way, the rule is the ball has to be thrown in the direction of and land in the vicinity of a receiver. What Anderson said, and he got it wrong, which makes it even more amazing. They've never hit that button before to bring in Walt Anderson, and the time they do, he screws up the rule. He says the ball is thrown in the direction and vicinity of the player because it was like a frozen rope right over the head of a running back. Well, it's got to land in the vicinity of the player. It's not enough that it whizzed over his head and landed 30 yards down the field. It's got to be thrown in the direction of and land in the vicinity of the player. And Cole Kmet, if we can show that again, Cole Kmet was the closest receiver. And you could argue, I guess it's thrown in his direction. I mean, we know it. You know it when you see it. This isn't any attempt to try to get the ball to an eligible receiver. This is avoid the sack. Throw it up. Maybe I'll get lucky and they won't call grounding. And, okay, you can say it's kind of in the direction, but there's no freaking way it lands in the vicinity of Cole Kmet. I think to qualify to be in the vicinity, it has to be in the vicinity of the field where it lands. I mean, we talk about catchable and non-catchable all the time with pass interference and what's catchable, what's not catchable. I mean, this is embarrassing to consider that this is a ball that would ever be qualified and classified as anything but intentional grounding. It really is. And Kevin O'Connell's point was, you called it on us in the first half. Where's the consistency? And that's the other thing. You don't have to get every call right, but at least try to show consistency between the two teams in a given game.
Yeah, it was blatant, Mike, and I said immediately that's grounding and was surprised that they didn't even talk about, I don't even think they talked about on that play, a grounding call. Usually the official who's over by the receiver and the referee talk and decide with a two-person decision whether it's grounding or not. There was no even discussion, I don't think, on that play, and there should have been because that ball was so far out of bounds, no one had an opportunity to catch that pass, and to me, it was clear grounding. And then you texted our text string and said, why wasn't that grounding? And it's a great question. Why wasn't that grounding? It should have been grounding. They didn't call it. And I think you made the point, Mike, and Kevin O'Connell made it. Inconsistency with officiating is a bigger problem than missed calls, blown calls. That Houston-Jacksonville game, it was bad for both sides. The other day, it was one of the worst officiated games I think I've seen, but it was pretty even on both sides because they were bad calls for both sides that were really crucial calls. And this one just seemed to me that it was way inconsistent, like you didn't know what kind of calls you were going to get. At least if they're bad and they're continually bad on the same types of calls. In the Houston-Jacksonville game, it was defensive holding. Then you know what you're going to get. But in this game, you had no idea what they were going to call or not call because it was so inconsistent, and that's an example of it.
when I get on the plane on Saturday and on Monday, either going to or from New York for the weekend at NBC, I'll put out a tweet inviting any and all questions just to kill that half hour of just waiting for the plane to fill up and push back and take off. And one of the questions I got yesterday was, what is the NFL going to do about the horrible officiating? And I found a GIF of one of those cool money counting machines where the bills flip through. That's what they're going to do. They're going to keep counting their money.
Yeah.
They're not going to do anything. There are so many flaws in the game right now, and they're not going to do anything about it until they have a financial consequence that forces them to do something about it. Until the house is fully engulfed in fire, they won't try to put the fire out. We got, it's the fire dog. This is fine. This is fine. Everything is fine. And the question is, will they act before it's too late? Because it really is bad, but they don't care. And my son and I have this debate all the time because he's willing to sign on to the it's rigged crowd, and they want certain teams to win, and it's rigged and it's rigged and it's rigged. And I try to explain to him they aren't good enough to rig it. They just, number one, they don't care who wins and who loses. They really don't. They still make the same money either way. And they can't pull it off. They wouldn't even try to pull it off. They're smart enough to not even try to pull it off. You can't pull it off. There's too many people who would be in on it. It's too hard to do. And with that said, you give a lot of discretion that cannot be tested or challenged or overturned to one or two people out there in black and white stripes, and bad stuff can happen if they aren't more careful about it, if they don't wake up before it's too late. Now, you mentioned playoffs, and the Vikings are still somehow holding on to the 7th spot. They got a half-game lead over the Rams, the Packers, and the Saints, who are each 5-6. They'll get a chance to catch up to the Vikings this weekend. The Vikings are off, and they all play. But don't we know how this is going to go at this point? Whoever gets the 7 seed is going to go to San Francisco and lose by 50. Unless they get lucky, and in Week 18 or Week 17, there are multiple injuries to key 49ers players, which really isn't that much of a stretch. That's one of the reasons the Vikings were able to beat them 5 weeks ago. Deebo Samuel was out and Trent Williams was out. It makes them vulnerable. But we're not going to have, and watch, as I say it, I'm thinking, look, it's going to happen. I can't imagine a situation where the 6th seed or the 7th seed in the NFC get hot this year and run the table. Between the Eagles, the Cowboys, and the 49ers, somebody's walking into a buzzsaw. The Lions could be vulnerable. That 3-6 game, the Lions could be vulnerable. That's the spot the Vikings blew last year as the 3 seed. 3-6 could be a problem. 2-7, forget about it. And even if you win as a 6th seed, you go to Philly or you cross paths with the Cowboys, you're done. You're just done. And I know everybody wants to make the playoffs. It's what you're playing for. It's why you're there. You want the extra game and an extra week of practice and evaluate guys. Yeah. But we know how the NFC is going to go, Charean, don't we? It's going to be the Eagles, the Cowboys, the 49ers when the dust settles.
Yeah, and I think, Mike, that the NFL has gotten exactly what they want, though, out of that, because when you look at that chart, all the teams that are lumped right there together that have an opportunity, you look at the Seahawks schedule, we're not even talking about number 6, you look at the Seahawks schedule, and we're going to talk about them later in the show and their playoff chances. They got a tough schedule coming up. So you got 5 teams really right there vying for those 2 spots, and you could end up with a team with a losing record that makes the postseason in the number 7 spot. So, I think 9 wins definitely is going to be good enough to get you there, to get you in the postseason. So they got what they want by adding that extra playoff game. They got more playoff revenue, as you said, count that money. And people are intrigued right now. People are the Rams. Hey, they're still in this thing. That in fact, they maybe have a better chance than anybody else in that listing right there to make the postseason. So they've gotten exactly what they want. They're continuing to count the money. They got that extra playoff game, and they've got the intrigue right now of who's going to make that 6 and 7. Who are going to make those 6 and 7 spots?
The vision that Pete Rozelle had for a parity-rich NFL back in the 70s when it was the Steelers and the Dolphins and the Cowboys and the Raiders ruling the roost You want to have as many teams alive for as long as you can, and having 14 playoff spots in a 32-team league keeps more teams alive longer, and it keeps more fan bases engaged, and it runs it all the way until week 17, week 18, where you think we still have a shot. And we'll worry about the implication of being the 7th seed and going to play the 49ers on their home turf later. For now, we just want to get in. We just want a ticket to the party. We don't care that we're going to get our asses kicked at the party. We just want to be there. It's better to be at the party and get your ass kicked than not be at the party at all. That's easy to say until you go play that game against the 49ers and lose 42-10. Hi, it's Mike Florio. Thanks for watching PFT on YouTube. Hit subscribe for the latest news and analysis from Pro Football Talk.